I am Doug Friedman.
And I am Meredith Levy. And this
is your mental
breakdown.
For two friends that have known each other since we were 12 and semi-smart people being licensed psychotherapists, we brick that every time.
You know, or is it just perfect? Are we doing it just the way it's supposed to be?
If you dig that podcast and you want to go deeper with us, we are on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. We're everywhere. We are everywhere. And we have a Facebook group where we have episode discussions and conversations about mental health. So if you want to check that out, be a part of it. Come find us on Facebook. Go to Facebook, search for Your Mental Breakdown, find the group, get on there and go deep with us.
Perfect. Yeah. Come find us at all of those places.
You've been doing some TikToks.
Maybe I have. They're fantastic. So
come find us everywhere that you find people to entertain you on social media.
Please. Also, last weekend, I believe it was, which I haven't seen it yet, though, Coming to America 2 came out.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember that first movie, and there were some things in that movie that you probably couldn't get away with today. And even in, I don't know if it was the first one or the second one, but I heard, it had to be the second one, that there was a news story where they had to address some like political joke that they made about somebody like being a Trump supporter, wearing a MAGA hat or something like that. And they had to address it being in the movie, or it got cut from the movie because of that. And I just thought it's really interesting how so much of our pop culture has shifted and changed, because so much of it that we go back and look at seems so highly inappropriate now.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say highly inappropriate for some people, but I think regardless of what we believe about whether it's inappropriate or not, to the matching the societal norms of what is and what isn't okay. Yes, for sure. Right. It's something that you'd be like, oh my God, what? Is that okay? And actually that's a super interesting that a lot of that comes up in our session with Drew today.
Absolutely. It's no coincidence. that was very carefully calculated and crafted. And it's something that is interesting because we can talk about it, and we have been talking about it, you and I, and how we grew up and what was, certain things that were funny or that were okay to talk about might always have been racist to some degree. It was just more widely accepted by certain groups. And
yeah,
I mean, I remember the big thing about the term politically correct, when that term first started getting thrown around.
Yeah.
And people were having to change what they say and watch what they say and watch how they're using certain things. To me, it was always about just being aware. And that's interesting. And you're right, a good segue to the actual session, because that was when the riots were happening and the looting was happening and Black Lives Matter and all of those things were happening right in the neighborhood where Drew lives or lived
right.
at the time. He was around it. He was surrounded by it. And his experience of it was pretty deep for him. And he was trying to make sense of it and how he felt and what he thought. And what I think is really great is that therapy is a place where you can kind of pull that stuff out and walk through it with somebody and make sense of it. And
right.
You don't have to worry about being politically correct or having an opinion. As a client, you just kind of say, here's what's going on in my head. How do I make sense of this?
I mean, that is interesting because yes, for me and in my opinion, 100%. And I know that there are some therapists that were not okay with the opinions of their clients. And that threw me for a big loop.
Right.
It really, really did. Sure. Okay. Again, teach his own, but like, it's hard because I get it. I'm just fucking open. And like, the truth is, like, I could have a client that comes in and is like a white supremacist or a freaking Nazi, and I'm Jewish, and I would just still sit and listen to them and listen to their experience. And as much as I would to anybody else, I just would.
And I get a little disappointed in therapists as a whole and as a profession when I hear therapists that are opinionated and that are a little more closed-minded And that's not what therapy is supposed to be, but we're all human. So people have that.
Yes.
As therapists, we're trained to check that. When you walk into the room and you're with the client, you suspend all of your own opinions and you go with the client. That we're supposed to do that without judgment. And we learn through experience how to do that. And sometimes it's hard.
Right.
And that's why a lot of therapists will have their own therapist so they can vent about everything they've gone through.
Right.
And it's also why when you guys hear me talking to Drew and we talk about church or his relationship with Jesus or what he thinks and feels about that, I'm going with him on that. I have other clients that are pretty staunch atheists and I go with them.
100%. And I think that's important for us to acknowledge, for people to understand, is that, and again, look, I get it. Therapists, we are human also. And I think therapists are absolutely entitled to not take certain clients if they don't want them because of their beliefs or because of certain things, if that's what they choose to do. I think for me, the issue comes in when all of a sudden you find out something about your client, right? Or their beliefs or whatever. And I know a lot of clients that feel constantly shamed about either their political opinions or something. And it's assumed they just don't bring them up. They just keep them shut because we're in LA. So if you don't have
right.
a political opinion that is straight up Democrat, like you're fucked. I mean, for the most part, it's rough. I have a hard time with that. And my clients know they can literally tell me anything.
Right. Well, I'll give you guys and you, Meredith, a little advanced teaser on the next season with a brand new client. One of the first things she asked me about when we were chatting on the phone, just initial before our first session, she told me what she did for a living and she wanted to know if I was okay with that. My response was, well, yeah, if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. If there's some issue for you there, then there's an issue.
Selling babies over the internet? Like, no, then we're solid. If you are, I feel like that's reportable. So otherwise.
That might not be okay. Right. But for the most part, and her experience was she had briefly saw a therapist that was judgmental and that was not okay with that. And that,
wow.
And it didn't work. And I don't think you can do effective therapy when you have an opinion like that conflicts with something that's not an issue for the client.
Yeah.
If you can align with the client on something, great. That's fine.
Right.
And you and I are very transparent. So we give a lot of ourselves to clients. And sometimes clients will ask for my opinion. And of course, I try to do the therapist thing and throw it back to them. Like, well, why do they want my opinion? What would that do? What would that help out? What would that mean?
Right. But I'll give mine sometimes.
Sure. Well, you're pretty opinionated.
Fuck you. No, I'm not. Just kidding. I had this very Orthodox Jewish client, and I have Orthodox Jewish family, but we're not super close. And it was so fascinating. I would ask all sorts of questions about it, and pure, total curiosity, inquiry, like zero judgment, total fascination. And like, because you come to therapy and that's obviously a big part of her identity. And so it was also me learning some things to understand culture a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because that's I'll throw two things out there, and this might be a little controversial, but I mean, that's part of what we do.
That's who we are.
Well, and it's also important to note that right now, as you and I are talking, we are nobody's therapist right now. We are people that do therapy for a living, but this is us chatting. This is entertainment.
Yes.
And I have worked with clients that have been affiliated with the Church of Scientology. And there are also clients, and we just talked about this, that are really into astrology. And do I have personal opinions on those two things? Of course. When I'm talking with a client, I suspend that and I go with them. And when we had Crystal on here and we were talking about astrology, I'm gathering information. It's like you said, like I will ask questions of my Orthodox Jewish client and true inquiry. And you and I think we're really looking for, how do people think? What drives them? What's the psychology behind that?
Yep.
And that's similar in theory to how we would talk to somebody who practices or uses astrology or Scientology or any of those things.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago too, if they were in the Nexium cult and they were like being abused or being controlled or brainwashed, then we might jump in because it's, do no harm. There might be harm being done.
Yeah. Well, we jump in and say, let's see if you want to talk about not being in this anymore. Something like that. Oh, but what if we could get the guy, the main dude from the cult? What if that was our client?
Keith Raniere?
That would be amazing.
Look, I told you I was fascinated with Charles Manson when I was younger.
Right.
And any of those like cult leaders that seem to be so charismatic. And for me, I think deeply wounded underneath that. And you remember this because I said this a long time ago on the podcast, but one of my favorite social worker jokes is the two social workers are crossing the street and they see this woman that's lying in the gutter, looks like she's been battered and abused. And one social worker turns to the other and says, wow, the guy that did that to her really needs our help.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I think very, very interesting to kind of look at what's the psychology behind that. And can people be helped and can people be rehabilitated, or do they need to be branded as wrong or guilty or bad? And we're two people that very firmly believe in not harming anybody.
Right.
That's why it's very difficult for me to watch The Vow, because in one sense, hearing about this cult is really interesting. On the other sense, what they're doing is so deplorable. Whether it's the brainwashing, the mind control, the abuse, any of that, I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah.
We've had to work on suspending our opinions about perpetrators of abuse or violence or any of that stuff to be able to work with them. And like you said, Meredith, you can also choose not to.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of not choosing to work with clients.
Right. So you guys stick around. We'll be back to break it down at the end. You will hear Drew and I think we start the session with literally just jumping right into what's going on around us and where he is with it. We kind of use that to get to something. And one great thing too, we've talked about this before, when you don't know what to talk about in therapy, you just start chatting about whatever's topical, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
We're thinking of your pattern or what relates to you, and we're looking for that. And it might lead you to something about your life and how you see the world, which is exactly what happens with Drew in the session.
Totally. Stick around. Listen. We'll be right back.
We'll be right here. We're not going anywhere.
Nope. We're going to stare at each other the whole time, silently.
It's wild, and I'm right in the heart of it, so it's crazy.
Yeah, so you're hearing the Ghetto birds all night.
And light shining in the apartment and all that. It's crazy. Yeah, they're doing spotlights and stuff. So, yeah, and like, it's wild because the shit you see on the news obviously is a little bit skewed. And so my mom thinks I'm just in a war zone, and it's nah, I'm good. I'm okay. One of those things that I think is a blessing for me too, is being able to have such an open conversation with friends on this kind of stuff, because he is so prolific in the lifestyle that it's even more interesting to hear his perspective, because it's even different than just being a light skin. And he was out protesting and walking and doing the whole thing, and he had a lot of built up anger for a lot of reasons that are all valid in my opinion. I asked him the question of like, where do I fit into this, and like, how do I help, and what do I do? From his perspective is interesting, because he was just like, keep being you and just don't do too much. I took that as, this isn't my fight, but I'm here to support it. It's been an open dialogue for a while, and I still don't quite understand it, especially coming from where I come from. It's a completely different thing than somebody that grew up in South Central. The other thing that he said that really kind of hit me, he was like, they don't know your heart, they just see your skin color. Because down here, they're targeting white people, which I understand that. And it kind of put me in his shoes for the first time, where I was like, oh, this is what that feels like. It is a blessing, I think, to be able to change my perspective in that way. I don't know. It's just hard for me to have that conversation right now openly with people because of where I come from and me not understanding. I don't want to be the ignorant one in this, but I do have to ask the question just so I can learn. It's just one of those things where I don't know. It's such a touchy subject right now that I don't know what to do.
I mean, you just said it. I don't want to be the ignorant one, so I'm asking questions. It's the ones that are ignorant. Ignorance is bliss. Like, no, it's not. Ignorance is ignorance. I don't know what the conversations are like, but something that I love hearing from you, man, is that you and
friend
are able to have these open conversations.
I don't know. I mean, I almost left. I almost went back to Canada. I'm trying to do what's best safety-wise for everybody involved and trying to play a balance because I'm still in the office. I'm still working, and even through COVID, I've been working. And so it's one of those things where I'm almost an outlier in this situation. I'm so heavily involved on both sides. I came from a very affluent white neighborhood, and I think that was also a blessing because I got to see how, quote unquote, they lived. And then I also grew up with people that were in the streets, and I chose to be in that for whatever reason. I couldn't tell you kind of why, but it was an escape for me at the time. Right. And so I think the blessing in my upbringing was seeing both of those. And now I'm trying to figure out how do I use that, because that's a tool, I think. That's a Green Beret tool that I have, where I can now go flip that and go help people. And so that's kind of what my mentality is right now, of trying to be that bridge almost.
Tell me about the bridge.
My mom kind of grew up Southern and then went way north and then lived very affluently in Seattle. Right. And so growing up, being that my mom grew up that way, she has a certain mentality towards people of color. And so it kind of hits home to me when people are talking about racist white people. It's my mom. Like it's my mom. And she has such a good heart. And I don't think she necessarily means it that way, but she's ignorant. And she is she's narrow-minded. And so I have that. And then I have somebody like a friend that I grew up with that came from nothing and grew up banging. And I see the struggles and I see it firsthand. The problem I'm having is I see the problem, but I don't know the solution to it. And I think that's universal right now.
I think what paralyzes some people is that they don't see the solution, so they won't engage in the problem. And we've talked about this in your relationships. It's not about resolving it right now. It's about communicating. And how can we communicate? It's something that still isn't about a resolution or an answer. It's about the discussion. And that's when you talk about the bridge. Yeah, maybe being the bridge is not providing a resolution or a solution. It's literally connecting two opposing sides.
Yeah, and I think personally, kind of tying this into my last weekend, it's a completely different perspective once you throw kids into it. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah. Breaks your heart? How?
It's just not fair. And I know life isn't fair and shit happens. I hope those kids don't grow up the way the last 10 generations have grown up. And I hope this changes something in the mix. There's a certain point where there's nothing you can do. They're going to grow up. They're going to go out on their own, and you can prepare them as much as you want, but the world's real. It's just scary. And it makes me revert to like a year ago when I just wanted to go back to middle of nowhere Canada and just get away from everything. But I know that's not the right solution. Yeah, I know that's not right.
You're actually living your solution, which is I'm staying in it. I'm being in it. And I'm talking metaphorically and literally. Like I'm staying in this. And it would be great if it could change. And how do we prepare them? This is where the Green Beret, Boy Scout with the gear, is a spectrum. Because to build up their egos and their inner strength and have them be beautiful people, or like you said, have a great heart. That's one thing, and that's fantastic, and that needs to happen for sure. However, not giving them the gear and prepare for what could possibly happen. It's like, well, if it starts raining, here's an umbrella, here's a poncho. Well, you might go into certain places where they look at you and your skin is not white enough or not black enough, either one. And here's what that might mean. And here's where that comes from. And here's how to prepare yourself. And here's how to conduct yourself. I mean, dude, when I worked in South Central, it blew me away that I would see people that I knew were like banging or slinging or something. And they'd be in their cars following traffic laws to the letter. Like if there was somebody crossing in a crosswalk, they would not turn right. Even if they had the green, they would not turn until the person hit the curb. Then they would go. And I remember one of my colleagues saying, yeah, that's because we'll get pulled over for any reason out here. And she was black. And she said, even I get pulled over. And I was looking at her like, fuck, I would never get pulled over if I didn't do anything.
Right. Something we're just completely not used to. And then that kind of ties me into work too. I'm trying to find purpose in what I'm doing. And now all this kind of makes me take a step back. And it's like, well, I love what I do. How do I tie everything we just talked about into my lifestyle of a job? because it's like I don't want to put clothes out because then I make $1 on it, and I wanted to go to proceeds, but it's just so much that perfect way to say is I'm just overwhelmed with everything. And that's completely different than last week where I said everything was super balanced. It's just overwhelming. And I mean, throwing girlfriend into it too, it's been hard too. And so we're trying to figure out a solution again for our problems. And
the thing that I love about stuff like that is if you guys are united in finding a solution, then that's the togetherness. It still sucks because you're apart. And in figuring out what you want to do, and some of the overwhelm might be, I don't know the solution yet. What about starting to have the conversations? What about looking for where some of that might be, especially with what you're talking about? Like, I love what I do, but I want proceeds to go to certain places. So maybe it's going, wait a second, who does this already? Who does stuff like this? What's a model I like? Do I like Tom's Shoes or Patagonia because of how they handle what they're doing? Like, okay, who else is practicing like that? And how do I bring issues of equality into the mix? Who's doing that right now? And how do I incorporate this, or where do I see it? It's almost like going back to the spew. And I think about it in terms of like freaking elementary school art projects of like the collage. And some people still do that now as like a vision board, but it's taking certain pieces and things that resonate with you that you really like and throwing them up on a board, just going, here's something I like from this thing, here's that. And then that will give you a sense of the overall picture and what it might start to look like, and then you can shape it. But right now, it sounds like some of that overwhelm might be all these ideas and things that are floating around, and I don't know a solution, I don't know a direction. Okay. Similar to how we would do it in the office, like take all those out, spew them out, then look at them, then we'll organize them.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I'm hitting a couple of categories in my spew. So I think I need to pick a category first, spew that, get that out, organize, and figure out where I need to go. Work is just crazy. I think that's really what's stressing me out most right now. Finally doing what I want to do, not what somebody else wants to do. It's the unorganized nature of what I'm doing that's stressing me out because I don't have any control over it. And it's my responsibility, but I can't control it.
Tell me more about that.
We ran out of dog food last night. And so I had to drive like an hour out to a different Petco during my lunch today to go get food. And it's just like little things right now that it's just piling up. And it's like, oh my God. And then I can't go see my parents. I haven't seen them in months now. And that's super abnormal for me too.
As opposed to a few times recently and way back when you were like, I don't want to see them right now. And that's okay. And that's my choice. This is not your choice.
Yeah. And like that, I think that's where I'm at. It's not my choice right now in a lot of different areas.
Yeah. And that's the control that we don't have. And that we used to say this, relax, nothing's under control.
Yeah.
But I mean, so many things right now are not under control. And finding a sense of being truly okay.
Yeah. I have nowhere to put my anxiety right now. I can't get to a gym. I can't go for a run. Like I'm trapped inside of my apartment. And that's something I haven't dealt with while other people have been dealing with COVID. So I'm trying to find a new outlet. And I like right now it's smoking weed and playing video games. And I know how that goes.
I don't know. It's funny because as you say that, I go like to solutions right away. And that's just highlighting like, that's what we do as humans. Like, oh, there's a problem. Here's a solution. And my job as a therapist is not to give you solutions. If I had them and they truly were solutions, believe me, I would. But it's more about helping you figure out how to do that. And that's part of the process of where you are right now is there's no clear solution. Yeah, when I'm fried and frazzled and I have anxiety and I don't know where to put it, man, I guess I'll smoke and play some vids. There was a time several weeks ago when you were like, yeah, I haven't smoked in a while. And it's like, I feel great. And now it's like, oh, okay. It's not necessarily a failure. No, I'm just trying to get through this and cope with this as best I can. And that's a tool.
Yeah. And so I was smoking morning to night and then through the night. I couldn't sleep. Whereas now I'm at least waiting until I get home. But the thing that I took a step back and kind of looked at it, girlfriend was here I was go in my mind, and it like work wise, and it's really
Sure.
hard for me to shut that off when I walk in the door. And what I'm trying to do for myself is to be able to come in and be even keeled throughout my day and my night, and not have this variance of like, okay, you're going to go 9 to 5 and then nothing. And so I'm trying to bridge that huge upswing and the big downswing and make it a little bit more level. And I've found that like smoking, it allows me to at least shut off, but then I get really fucked up and I'm not there.
You're talking about, I've got these highs and these lows, and smoking weed helps level it and bring it right here. Right. But that stuff on the high end and the low end hasn't gone away. We've just gotten into a fog and we don't see it, which is in effect a way of coping with it for sure. I think what's been more effective for you, because I've seen it in you, is when I have outlets for this. When I have an outlet for all the energy and where I want to put stuff, and that could be anxiety, whatever it is, that's going for a swim, working out. Okay, I don't have that right now. Needs to be some sort of energy release. On the downside, it's, oh, when I'm feeling down, what can I do? But it's for you, again, looking at outlets for the high and the low, not that dampener to get you even keeled.
Right. And it makes a lot more sense, because I think what I've been doing is just blocking it and not dealing with it, and waking up the next morning and being like, what do I need to do now? Instantly stresses me out to start the day.
Yeah. And that's, I wouldn't be surprised if it went unchecked. That's the wake and bake method. Oh, I woke up and, oh my God, all this shit's here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, as you said, like, oh yeah, I've been smoking weed for 10 years. Right. Because you just keep doing that instead of dealing with things. And then something you used to say to me a lot, whenever things were going good, like, yeah, well, there's probably something I'm not looking at. Because what you're used to, what you've trained yourself to do, is ignore the high, the low, and just stay in that even keeled space. And the word that you said a while back, compartmentalize.
Compartmentalize, yeah.
Right? Hey, there you go. You nailed it. But that idea of like, where do things fit and how do I tuck them away and how do I do that so I can keep going? All right, but they're coming with you.
Yeah. I'm looking at that as almost as like a house now. And I picture it as like my house back home, because I know that's like almost a safe spot for me. And I know everything's at, so I can kind of throw stuff in each room where I need it to be. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do, of like, here's my playroom, here's my garage for the tools, here's my kitchen where I need to stay healthy, stuff like that. And that's really helped me just kind of think of it in more of a picture form. And I put work in the office, and it's been nice just to see it that way, because then I can imagine it, and it's a lot easier to picture.
I like that because it also means it's all contained under one roof. When we compartmentalize things and shove them aside, and then we move on, we don't realize that they're still coming with us.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about is, no, I want to compartmentalize it. It's like, I want to put a label on it. I don't want to just box it and stick it up in a garage somewhere on a shelf. I want to neatly pack it up, put a label on it, and put it somewhere where all of them are going to be, so I can see all the labels on them and pick and choose when I'm going to deal with them.
Right.
I want to go back for a second, because you said you're kind of seeing a few categories of spew categories. Work is a stressful one.
Yeah.
You got a new relationship. That's another one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they are for you. I want you to name them, not me, because I don't know if those are even accurate.
Yeah. I think, work is a big one right now too. So mentally, I have my dream job on the horizon and shit right now. And so that's hard in a mental state alone. And then kind of add to that of work just being an absolute mess. It's like, I feel obligated to go now. I don't want to do them dirty by walking out in 3 weeks. I want to, because I don't really like it there, and I can't wait to start this next thing. But I want the good moral standpoint of, hey, I signed up for this and I'm here fully, because that's who I am, and I want to stay in that. So that's one. New relationship, another big one, because there's so much more added to that. I mean, we're doing long distance. So I'm trying to navigate that. And now work-wise, I'm trying to figure out what makes sense and everything in that. My brother and family, I put them under one umbrella. I get hints of my mom not doing very good again. I'm worried about that. I don't take the guilt on anymore. I don't feel guilty for not being there. I'm so worried about her. I know my dad's working a lot right now and with COVID and all that. So I'm worried about him and her.
What started us on this thread is I was asking about how you compartmentalize the categories for all the different things that are spewing and overwhelming you. And giving them some context and some organization is going to help. And I love that you're pulling your old analogy reference of filling different rooms in the house. And your brother and family, yeah, it might be in one room, but there are different parts of the room.
Yeah.
Your dad, your mom, and your brother are all very different people with very different needs, and you have a very different relationship with each one of them.
Right.
Mom, yeah, I'm worried. The worry's not going to go away. And would the worry go away if you flew up there and took care of her for a couple of weeks and made sure she was okay?
No, not even close.
Right. So it won't be there. But it's looking at, from your perspective, is there something you want to convey or say or do in terms of that box in that room? Might be, might not be. Might be like, hey, Mom, worried about you, or yeah, feeling it out from your end and doing what feels good for you. Which I think a big shift overall I'm seeing is that what feels good for me is not taking care of everybody else first and at my expense.
And I think that's something I'm still learning, is the at my expense thing. Friend hit me up, his nephew that passed away.
Right.
He was like, hey, I need an outfit for him to wear. And I was like, oh, I got you. Like 100%, like take anything out of my closet, sending him pictures, and he's relaying to his mother and back and forth, all this stuff. And none of it worked out. And so I felt like I let him down in that because I didn't have the stuff that he needed at the time. While I didn't go into a rabbit hole of like, oh, I fucked up, oh, this is all my fault, all that kind of thing, I still felt I wish I could have done something more feeling. And so I'm still kind of learning the at my expense thing, but I'm starting to understand it. I want to be able to provide everything for everybody. And that's how I've always been.
And that's everything for everybody. That's how I've always been. Okay. We're finding new trail for that piece too.
Yeah.
And I couldn't provide him the right clothes for his nephew to wear. Yet I did provide something.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
and when he first called me for this, he was like, I know you got me. That was the first thing he said. And so like, I take that as, I know he can always rely on me. I want to show up. That's my thing. I want to show up when he needs me.
Did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My best ability, for sure.
Exactly. To my best ability. Could you have called around to every designer, every person you know that has roughly the same build and put together like...
And I thought about it.
Of course you did. Why didn't you do it?
But I thought I was overextending myself, and I knew I couldn't handle that from a timing, from a cost, from everything involved with that. I knew I couldn't take that on. And so I
Right.
tried to give him everything I could.
Exactly. At some point, if you haven't already, like saying like, hey, man, I wish I could have done more to help. I really want to be there for you. He knows your integrity. He knows who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to prove it. And sometimes saying, oh, so glad you were able to get an outfit for him and like glad it worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even have to do the, I'm sorry I didn't have it. Because then that's about you. He reached out for you and you like, I'm glad I could be there. I wish I could be there more. Is there anything else I can do?
Yeah, when the other guilt part I'm feeling right now in all of this is I really wanted to go to the funeral. A nephew was family to me too. I'm just not able to, and that sucks.
Did you convey that in some way to him?
No, not yet.
Okay. Do you need to or want to?
I think I want him to know that I wanted to be there. I don't think I need him to know why I couldn't come.
There's a conversation that you can have with him, even just how you said to me what you said. Friend is family to me too. And you're family to me. And I really wish I could have been there for you and for him. Letting him know that, hey, I feel this as part of my family. And I'm sure you feel it. If you ever want to talk or I'm just whatever, but I'm letting you know I feel this and I really wish I could have been there and whatever that might be. Because that's coming from you. There's something about it for you that you just want to offer up to him. That goes back to something we talked about. You were like, I need to offer people something. And we said, well, maybe what you offer is your authenticity.
Right. Yeah.
So here it is.
Yeah. Good time for that to show up.
Part of my authenticity and part of showing up is sometimes I don't know a solution. Sometimes I don't know the best way or this. And being that bridge between things is, yeah, I want to hear both sides. Interesting little duality there of I want to hear both sides and be the bridge, right? And then when we were talking about the weed, like the highs and the lows, but I need to be even keeled and in the middle.
Yeah.
Maybe what truly gets you even keeled is allowing the lows and the highs to be both there and coexist.
Yeah.
Put things in different boxes in different rooms of the house and compartmentalize when we need to, and recognize that it's all still there. Same way we talk about Yoda and Vader. They're both there. It's not getting rid of one so the other can live. It's, yeah, they're both here.
Yeah. And I didn't really think about that in the sense of like my highs and lows. And I think I did that with disappointment. I'm getting better at that in my life. And now I'm trying to apply it. I want to start applying it to that too. So with the highs and the lows and everything in between.
I think I told you this a little while back. There's something I used to love doing when people go out of town or something like that. If you remember this, it's tell me your high, your low, and the oddity that happened. Some good thing, some not so good thing, and something just a little strange. Think of your week so far. Lay it on me. What's your high, your low, and your oddity?
My high was coming home from work and having dinner ready. That was a big one for me of like, okay, like you showed up exactly where I needed you to show up, how I needed you to show up without me saying anything. It was huge. That was the high probably for the last 2-3 weeks. The low, so I want to throw kind of work in the chaos mode of what that is. I usually like chaos, but this is a chaos that I don't like. And so the non-controlling of day to day, it's kind of the whole week again. But that was definitely like the big picture low. Okay, the oddity was being in a different perspective than I have been in my whole life. And by that, I mean not being able to go down the street to a Petco and buy dog food.
Right. Driving an hour to a Petco.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely odd. I like the high-low oddity because it's something that as you're experiencing highs and lows, it gives it a name sometimes. Because the overwhelm is often a product of the accumulation. And if we can name it as we go along, it's a little easier.
Well, and I really like that, the high-low oddity too, because as of late, basically when I'm trying to check in with girlfriend, I'm like, hey, tell me a good thing about your day. And I think that doesn't give her the ability to tell me a bad thing about her day. I'm only asking for the good. That's a way better application than just asking for the good.
Yep. Sometimes, especially when we're long distance, doing the high-low oddity gives you a little framework, a little way to relate that isn't just tell me the good things or, yeah, go ahead and vent, tell me all the bad stuff. It gives a little container for it.
I like that a lot.
Play with that one.
Awesome.
And we are back.
We certainly are. We should just jump right in like you guys did, because you just jumped right in. So this was the riots and Black Lives Matter beginning of the movement here in LA. And there's not a lot for us to talk about in terms of the ideas behind the events, because, again, we're just here to support our clients and what they need. And this isn't going to be a political or anything discussion. But I do think just hearing what he had to say about it and talking about how he grew up super differently and being affluent and white, and then his mom was from the South. And he's like, my mom's straight up racist. And I'm like, cool, dude.
Right.
All good. And I can relate to that in some ways and with some family members, and can't pick your family. God love them. And he even explained, like, yeah, it's because these thoughts in the South and whatever. And yet it's just sort of like a conversational piece. He's just talking about it. I think it's important to be able to let somebody talk about something like that without than saying, but it's 2021. Like, we all know that. Like, we get it.
To me, what you're getting at in the heart of it, because we're talking about somebody's therapy session. We're not talking about the political ramifications or the discussions or what it means. And what we're looking at is how one individual is making sense of the world around him and how he relates to it. And the thing that I liked more than anything, and he and I said this in the session, was I really like that he's having these discussions and he's communicating. And he and his best friend have been having these discussions since well before this. His best friend's mixed race. So they've been talking about this. His best friend kind of grew up like banging, like in that environment. And that's not foreign to Drew. Even though he comes from a white affluent family, he chose to hang out with the gangbangers and the drug dealers. And interesting that in the session, he says, for whatever reason, I gravitated towards that. I'm like, hey, okay, we're going to hit that at some point too.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot to it. And so just for us to break down what he is bringing up in the session, that's what we're talking about. Right. So, and that's it.
Exactly.
Because it is a difficult topic, but it did lead into a lot. I think one of the things he pointed out was like the kids, and he had touched on that last week, but that it's not fair for them and the world is scary and it's real. And yeah, it is. And I think that's something really important to notice. And then also to try to find some balance in that, the idea of trying to find balance between living in fear and moving forward, or I'm not sure exactly, but.
Well, for Drew, I think a lot of it was he's wondering like, well, what's the right thing here? And I think, again, why I'm hearing that he's having these discussions and he's thinking this way. And he would say like, yeah, I'm talking to my best friend. I'm like, hey, educate me.
Yep.
Tell me about this. I just want to learn stuff. And he even talked about being the bridge. For him, I don't think the bridge is about a solution. I think it's about connecting to opposing sides, is what I said in here. And that's something that if he's playing that role, it's okay, recognizing that there's different perspectives and it's not about right or wrong. It's just about being able to communicate differences.
Totally. And I think it's cool because a lot of people said that to their friends, educate me, and people didn't like that and don't like it. And that's okay too, because they're like, it's not my job to educate you. And it's like, okay, totally, 100%.
True. When we were working down in South Central at the clinic there, I was telling Drew how I was talking to a colleague of mine. It was fine, her educating me, because I was literally going like, why is this like that? That's so weird. And it's not, it's just out of my experience. That hasn't been my experience. And some people would say, oh, that's your white privilege. I'm like, maybe that is. Okay. Yeah. And now it's me understanding that. So I don't have to be the dude behind somebody who's not turning right, honking my horn and getting upset. I just realized like they have a different experience than I do.
Totally. 100%. That was like my very first school I went to when you and I were working together in the inner city. The first school I went to, I pulled up to park and there's cops outside, and I walk inside and through the metal detectors. And I was like, saw my very first client. And I was like, why are there cops here? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, what happened? She's like, they're here every day. And I'm like, no fucking shit. And I don't know. I didn't have that experience. So I learned.
Right. It's something I said early on in the podcast was these are things that get normalized. It's not normal, but it's normalized because it's what we're used to and accustomed to. And down in that same neighborhood where we worked, I went to a client's house and there was caution tape around and the ghetto birds were flying. And I was like, wait, what's going on? They were like, oh yeah, somebody got shot last night. Like, really? Right. Oh my God. And they're like, yeah, it happens all the time. And I think they said to me like, yeah, it's normal.
Right.
Like, it's not normal. It's normalized. And it's something we just accept.
Yep, exactly. You guys were talking about a collage. What was that about?
We were talking about him like kind of organizing his thoughts. Like he was saying, I'm kind of all over the place. Back to language that you love, a version of being able to spew and just get it all out. Sometimes in order to make sense of things, we need to have like a brainstorming session, or we need to get everything out.
That's right.
We even talked about having categories of how you spew and where you put things. And for me as the therapist, I'm hearing he's actually looking for some way to organize his thoughts, which is something we've talked about in different forms before. So I'm not telling him how to do it. I'm kind of saying, oh, well, it's sort of like in school when you would do a collage or you do a vision board, because he wants to have purpose in what he's doing.
Right.
It's like looking at these things that are important to you. And I'm kind of giving him some idea, but I want to see what he's going to pick and gravitate towards, because that might be his method of really understanding and making sense and organizing his thoughts.
Right. And then the next thing you guys sort of jumped into was the unorganized nature of what he's doing and that he doesn't have control over, just work-wise, I think. And in terms of life, he hasn't seen his parents in months. He has no control over them and so many things. And then he started talking about, I guess, like, I love how he phrased it. He said, I have nowhere to put my anxiety right now. I really liked that because it's so true. And talking about how he doesn't have a gym, there's nowhere to go run. And you guys talked about his work and smoking weed and then how to be even keeled, and that your highs are still highs, your lows are still lows. Are you just avoiding it? And then he talks about compartmentalizing, which was amazing because he usually has trouble with that word, right? And he got it right. And I was like, yeah, he said it right. Amazing.
Ironic that it's he has trouble saying the word and we're trying to actually work on doing the thing, like being able to compartmentalize. And yeah, that whole idea of not having control, that spikes anxiety. So kind of looking at, and a line I've busted on him before, it's kind of a Buddhist saying that relax, nothing's under control. And it's really realizing that, yeah, we really don't have control over a lot of things. It's when we try to exert control over things that can't be controlled or that are uncertain or unknown, it becomes really uncomfortable. And I think there's a piece of that as well as a piece of, for him, those highs and lows that were hitting him that, leads to him feeling overwhelmed. I think he even said last week, we talked about just being whelmed and he was doing okay.
Yeah.
And this week it feels overwhelmed because there's all these highs and all these lows, and smoking weed will just kind of give him that even keel sensation. But as I said, the highs and lows don't go away. So then we did talk about compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
And then he hit something that I thought you would pick up on.
Yeah. And then he talked about the house, right?
Yeah. Yep.
He compared it to compartmentalizing. He just had this visualization of a house and take something, put it away, put it in a room, an office, like his visualization, and then just can take it out later. I think it's interesting because for the most part, I want to say it's scientific, although people even doubt that. But there is this area in the brain, like men can compartmentalize more easily and more often than women because of the difference in their brains and the connections of corpus callosums. And the idea is that that's why women talk more and men can store this stuff, right, in their brains. They can put it away somewhere and then take it out later. That idea, in DBT, we talk about like shelving it. We take it. We're like, this is not doing anything for me right now. My anxiety, whatever it is, like I can't change anything right now. I'm going to take this topic, this idea, I'm going to put it in a box and I'm going to put it on the shelf over there. I'm not going to shove my feelings down, but I'm going to put it over there and I'll get it back later and I'll address it.
Right.
And it sounds like Drew, same thing, right? Putting it in a house, putting it in a room somewhere.
Yep, exactly. And I love this. I love what you're talking about because there is some science to this, right? And men and women do have different brain structure. Like I've seen similar articles where it says men can lateralize better and compartmentalize better, and women have more neural connections and cross, like it's almost like cross-stitched. So it's just different ways of thinking. And that might be a broad generalization, but these are scientific articles that I've read.
I have really good books on it if anyone wants to know, because I read about it a lot. I'm fascinated by the topic. And
I think it's really cool. And again, what I loved is Drew just going, well, here's my analogy for it. And he said he was even picturing his house back home because that's a safe space for me. Like, great. So we've got that as a foundation.
Right.
And I even said like all under one roof. And he was like, yeah, I can put things that are good for me and healthy in the kitchen. And then there's this playroom and I could put stuff there. And then the garage, those are like my tools or things that I don't want to look at right now. And that to me is a way of helping him organize. Him finding his way of organizing, not my way. I'm not going to give him my way because it might not work for him.
Totally.
Finding it for himself. And if you do that and he puts stuff and compartmentalizes it in different rooms of that house, then it's not going to be as overwhelming. the high and low will still be there. They're just going to be in those rooms that, for example, you can come to therapy and go, okay, I'm going to go up in the attic and we're going to see what's in that room right now. Or like, well, I've been living in the playroom. Right. I really need to pay attention to the kitchen and get healthy. Here's what's going on here.
Yeah. And then I think, and I do this a lot with my clients, is he was talking about his stress and everything going on, and you actually had him break it down.
Right.
And like, well, what are those things? And I love doing that because people tend to get so overwhelmed. Everything's overwhelming. Everything sucks. Everything. Right. I'm so anxious, and I'm like, well, okay, you tell me. He was talking about, and I wasn't sure, I was a little confused, but mentally he said like his dream job's on the horizon, but where he's working now is a mess and he feels obligated to go, but he doesn't want to be a dick and walk out in like 3 weeks. So is that the making masks job, or he got his dream job, or I don't know.
What he was saying was mentally and emotionally, my dream job is on the horizon where I'm being able to do my own thing. Right. But he's not there yet. He's working towards that. But in the meantime, he has to take a job where he has to go. And he's feeling that obligation to go. And yeah, it's one thing to be making masks. That's not the only thing he does. It's the kind of thing that he's like, yeah, this is a gig to make money for right now because I need money. And I signed up for this. I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to do it. But man, it's my heart's not in it.
Yeah. And then he brought up his girlfriend and how it's a new relationship and how it's long distance. Is it like long distance, like different states, or long distance, not both in LA?
Not both in LA. It's a lengthy drive, but he makes it frequently.
Okay.
It's a couple hours in the car.
Okay. Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? And especially during COVID, although I suppose it makes the drive faster because there's no traffic, especially
right.
Especially back then. And then and he talked about his brother and his family and little hints of his mom not doing well. But I liked how he was able to say he's worried, but he doesn't feel guilty about not being able to do anything about it. And then just COVID and worried about them and COVID, and a very, very different take on it, of course, being worried and also not being like, well, shit, I need to get there. I need to go rescue.
Yeah, it's not for him to solve it. It's just like he can have the worry. And we said this way back, and he keeps pulling it back even to this day. This day, meaning not what you just heard a year ago,
right?
But what he and I talk about currently. He still talks about that 10% disappointment, like leaving room for that. Even now, it's sort of like having 10% worry. Like, okay, I can worry about that. I don't have to have it envelop me and take over me. And I'm worried about my mom. And now that's everything. And I have to solve this, and I have to fly out there, and I have to take care of it in order for me to be okay. He's realizing like, yeah, that's not where I'm at anymore. And that was similar to, you're probably going to hit this next because it's the next thing that came up, was his best friend whose nephew passed away, called him up, was like, hey, can you hook me up with an outfit? You're the fashion guy. And it was really interesting that we kind of looked at how he wants to do everything for everybody all the time. So for him, when his best friend calls him and needs an outfit, previously it was, I need to give him the outfit in order to have it be okay and be validated and be a good friend. And now he's realizing like, yeah, I couldn't provide it for him, but I did provide me being here. And he called me because he knew like, I know you're there for me.
Yeah. And he was saying like before he would have felt like he felt like he let him down, but he knows that's not true.
Right. And that's, he even said like, I want to show up when I'm needed. And I said, well, did you show up? And he said, yeah, to the best of my ability. I didn't really pick that line apart, but did you show up to the best of my ability? Well, you did show up. Right. You were there. Like the best of his ability in his brain still is getting that outfit.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who, when he was in Vegas with the previous girlfriend, was about to book a helicopter for them to get home, which was, that was nuts. I remember that. Right. But that's what he thought he had to do, is I need to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nice to hear him loosening that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. You talked about a thing that you do, like what's your high, low, and oddity of the day?
Yeah. Oh, I love this.
I love that. I feel like I want to do that every day now. Let's do it. I want to hear yours.
And we've done this on the podcast before too. It's not the first time I've said this to Drew and not the first time you and I have talked about it.
Yeah.
The high-low oddity is one of my favorite things. I do it for a trip. I just got back from Colorado and it's thinking about, oh, what was my high-low and oddity of Colorado? You can do it for anything. You can do it for a day. You can do it for a trip, a period of time, whatever it is. I think it's really fun because it leaves room for, and if you remember us talking earlier in the session about the highs and the lows, it leaves room for having both of those. You don't have to run from it. You can just acknowledge it. Like, here is a high, here is a low, and here is something that was just a little odd.
Right. I like that it's oddity. I don't know why. I mean, maybe it just makes me think of David Bowie, but
I was going to say
word.
Bowie. It was like, that's saying like, what was your high, low, strange? Like, no, I don't know. High, low, weird. No, like space oddity. I mean, that's what I think of every time.
Yeah.
When I say high, low oddity, I think of Bowie and that makes me smile.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
So came home from work and I guess his girlfriend had dinner ready. I think that was what he meant. Like dinner was ready.
Right. And as we were listening back to this session, I thought, oh, I hope people don't think that he's like a 1950s guy and just wants his woman to have dinner ready when he gets home from work. What he was intimating, and if you've been listening and following along, you know Drew, I think well enough to know that it was somebody taking care of him, somebody providing something for him, making life a little easier. If you know your 5 love languages, it's an act of service.
Yeah.
And it's a really nice way of showing love for somebody, whether it's the other person's love language or not. Being able to do something that is an act of service for somebody to whom that means a lot is great.
Right. Yeah, for sure. His low, I think, had to do with like work stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just all the day-to-day chaos that he was feeling.
Yeah. And then the oddity, which I thought was very accurate and was just being in a different perspective now and not being able to go to Petco down the street. So did he have to drive an hour away to go to a Petco?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Talking about, it's wild now, just trying to take care of my dog. And I needed to get his food for him, but the Petco down the street didn't have it, and calling around. And there was like one Petco an hour away I had to drive to get the food. Fast forward to the end of the session. He's talking about the oddity. He's like, driving an hour to get freaking dog food.
Yeah. And guess what, Drew? A year later, we're still in an oddity. That's just the world is an oddity still.
Yeah, what's my oddity? The entire last year.
So true.
I mean, think of the last year. We launched the podcast and like 2 weeks later, we're in quarantine. And we're a year later. Like you said, what's become normalized for us is that, we just don't socially interact. We wear masks everywhere we go. It's a wild, wild time.
Sure is. Drew sounds like he's definitely working through his stuff. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this pandemic, the beginning, at least, we're all sort of used to it now, but how that plays out for him. I'm excited to see if he has any 2-week or 2-month or 6-month meltdowns like I did. So we'll see how his goes.
Yeah, we'll see what his high-low and oddity of the pandemic is. And all you guys, what's your high-low oddity of your day, your week, your month, or your year?
Let us know. We would love to know.
Yeah. Find us on social media. We told you at the top about the Facebook group. We do have discussion threads on every episode there. So find this one. Give us your high-low oddity. That'd be cool.
Perfect. All right. Talk to you later.
We will catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.